Hi, welcome to Legal Talk with Stacy Clark. We've got a great guest today. I don't know about all of you, but I did a little spring cleaning this past weekend. We did our garage, and I know one thing we didn't get to are important documents. And you may be watching now and thinking, oh no, I don't have things like a will in place or a medical directive. Well, after this program, you're going to know exactly what to do. Our guest today is Lisa Shearman, and she is a principal at Hamburg, Rubin, Mullen, Maxwell, and Lupin, a terrific firm in Montgomery County, and an extremely accomplished trust and estates lawyer. She has over 20 years experience advising and implementing estate plans, powers of attorney, medical directives, and so much more for local men and women, and yes, their businesses as well. Lisa really listens to her clients and helps them precisely protect and decide their futures. She structures documents to preserve her clients' wealth and reduce estate taxes if at all possible. So I'm really looking forward to understanding what I need to have at the ready. And next spring cleaning, this will be one area that I'll have taken care of. So without further ado, welcome. We're so glad you're here, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and thanks for having me.
It's a delight. I can't wait to learn. So let's get to some of the basics. When we talk about estate documents, what are some of the basics, as I mentioned, that everyone should have in order?
Well, definitely want to have a will, a financial power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, which can include advance directive or a living will, and also an instruction sheet to your family or information for your family so that they know what your wishes are as far as your funeral and other items that they might not be aware of.
Okay, and you're going to talk us through what each of those documents are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people may not know at this point what a power of attorney is and what it does and what it covers, and same thing with medical directives. So why is it important to have these things in place? What could happen if we don't?
Well, you know what I like and what I see a lot with my clients is that everyone likes to have control over their stuff. You know, they want to know, during lifetime, they want to know where things are. They want to make sure everything is held properly, where it's going to. But without a will, when you do pass away, and everybody is going to pass away at some point in time.
Shocker, spoiler alert there. Yeah.
It's so important to have a document that's going to direct where those things go and what happens to them. I mean, there are certain things that will control what happens to your financial accounts, to your car, to your house. If you own property jointly with a spouse or with anybody else, that potentially is going to, go to that person. But it's the other things. It's all the, mixed, assets and, personal stuff that is not going to have titling on it. And then for that reason, I think it's really important to have a document that's going to say, where does it go? Who's going to receive it? What are the terms? And without a will and without that, without that document, you leave it up to the state, government, to our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to whoever happens to be in charge of your estate. So if you really want to continue to have, a say in what happens to your things, having a will is going to be really important.
And isn't it possible if you don't have a will that some of your property can go to the state?
Absolutely. I mean, Pennsylvania does have laws that direct what happened to your things, but it's like I always use the family tree example. If the way those laws work is that if you don't have a will, it's going to go to, potentially your spouse, your children. If you don't have a spouse and children, maybe your parents, maybe it's going to go out to a sibling or to a niece or a nephew. So you're staying within the realm of the family tree. But what if your relationships or your, the family that you have isn't traditional? What if you don't have, that spouse and child? Or what if you're in a blended family where you have, a spouse from a, second marriage, they have children from a former marriage, you have children from a former marriage, you have children together. When you get all that mixed up together, the laws that Pennsylvania has in place aren't necessarily going to cover that. And definitely in situations where you don't have any type of technically legal relationship with the person that you want to receive your property. Give you an example.
Yeah.
I am working right now with a family whose brother died at a very young, unexpected age. He is not married, had a longtime girlfriend. He has children from a couple of other different relationships.
Okay.
And he did not have a will. And here's the saddest thing about this is that all of his, his stuff, his money, his assets are going to go, and not sadly, it's going to go to his children, but nothing's going to his girlfriend. She is not going to continue to get to live in the house that they have been living in for the past 10 years. And his kids, who are very young, are now going to get all this money at age 18. So, that's why it's important to have something that's structured, that gives direction to your family as to who's going to get your property, when they're going to get it, and what the terms are. And, when you have, and in this case, he has young children, so you need to set up and appoint guardians. And if you don't have a will, you kind of leave it up to whoever steps up to go to court and ask to be the guardian.
Oh, so you can indicate that in your will. If you have young children, who should be in charge of them should you pass away?
Right. And I mean, there's still a court process that needs to happen for someone to be appointed a guardian, but the court definitely takes into consideration, your directions or your wishes. And if you don't have something that says those things, then potentially it's just whoever happens to get there first.
And let's talk about some vocabulary. What does the word beneficiaries mean? Just explain that simple term.
Sure, yeah. So beneficiaries are the people who potentially are going to receive your property, who are going to receive your, the stuff in your house, your cars, your financial accounts. And as I mentioned earlier, there are certain designations of beneficiaries that a lot of people are familiar with on their retirement accounts, on life insurance. Sometimes, it's become a little bit more prevalent that financial institutions are allowing you to add beneficiaries to your regular brokerage or cash accounts. Some people might recognize if you say a pay on death, transfer on death, POD, TOD, that is a way to direct assets to go to those people who you want to receive them. And those things actually pass to those people without your will being involved. So it's always really good when you're, if you don't have documents in place and you are getting your planning together, that you also look at all those things, because it's those are going to actually control what happens to that property versus what your will says.
I see. So you've got two sets of concerns there, things you've already agreed to in terms of title and, say, owning a house together.
Right.
And things that you haven't that you're going to designate in your will. I see two important piles.
And actually, I just met with a woman yesterday, and she has a will, and she just wanted to make a couple changes, and we were going through, and she's leaving, I don't know, $100,000 in different total in different amounts to people. And then after we got talking, I said, okay, well, how are your assets, like your financial accounts and these things? And she's like, oh, I have my son on everything. I'm like, oh, okay. So you have your son on your financial account? Yep. Brokerage account? Yep. House? Yep. I'm like, okay, well then none of this is going to any of these people. And she didn't realize that. She didn't realize, because she had the beneficiaries already set up, or she owned the property jointly, that her will really wasn't going to be able to distribute the $5,000 to her niece or the $10,000 to a grandchild.
Right, because it had all been allocated already.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. And you recommend financial powers of attorney. Why do you do that? And tell us what those powers mean.
Right. So, I mean, I think what, everyone understands is your will is going to, potentially control what happens to your assets when you die. Your financial power of attorney is one of those documents that you need while you're alive. And so, at death, it no longer is valid. So the financial power of attorney is going to give someone called your agent the ability to manage and handle all of your financial assets, your your house, potentially bank accounts, pay your taxes. I like to think of it as the person who kind of steps into your shoes and is able to do all of the things that you can do, but because you can't do them, you need that person to do those things. Now, most times, in the intent when we put our financial powers of attorney together, most times we're really thinking that the need is I'm going to be incapacitated, or I have an accident or something, and now I'm either in the hospital or maybe at an elderly age or in a nursing home, and you're not as easily able to manage those things, and so that's when it takes place. But I'll tell you, the way that they're set up generally is that they're effective the day you do them. So if I am trying to sell my house and I can't make it to the closing, my husband has a power of attorney and he can sign all the documents for me.
Wow, I had no idea about that. Keep going.
Yeah. And I think another great example is, so when my daughters turned 18, I made sure that they had given me power of attorney, me and my husband, so that if anything ever came up while they're in school and at college, that I'd have the ability to, talk to their doctors and we'll talk about healthcare powers of attorney in a minute, or be able to, make transfers. Very important when you have kids in college to be able to make transfers into their accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So the other day, my daughter loses her debit card. Mm-hmm. And I called the bank and I said, I just need to get her a debit card. And like, oh no, she needs to come in personally. We can't, you can't do it for her. And I said, well, hold on a second. I have a financial power of attorney. I showed up at the bank with my financial power of attorney and I got her the new debit card. So they have a lot of use. And I think they're really important to have in place. I always tell my clients, while you're alive and competent, you can do anything you want, but it's when those instances happen where you have an unexpected illness, unexpected accident, and all of a sudden your family's scrambling to try to be able to, get access to your bank account or to be able to talk to somebody. And if you don't have those documents, there's more steps that you're going to need to go through potentially to be able to get access.
Mm-hmm. So if someone has a slow-moving disease like Alzheimer's or forms of dementia, mm-hmm. how would the financial power of attorney kick in those instances?
Well, like I said, generally when we put them together, they're effective on the day that they're signed, so that there's no necessarily triggering point that it becomes effective. It's still it's out there, and but the thought process is you don't really need to use it until those occasions occur. But so, if I have power of attorney for my mom, mm-hmm. My mom, 83, still doing great, but at some point she feels that she doesn't want to handle her financial, pay her bills, do those things. Or, for instance, if she does get dementia or, starts to show signs of being unable to properly manage her affairs, or is making, maybe not the best choices, then I have that document in place to say, okay, well, she gave me this authority. So the bank can say, okay, Lisa, you have the ability to, to write out her checks, or you have the ability to transfer money between these accounts.
Now, how does that work if you have a wonderful daughter, we're not talking about you, who also has a criminal past and liking and would like to steal all of mom's Social Security or cash checks or move money?
Right. What
would happen in those cases?
Well, we do tell all of our clients when we're making decisions as to who should serve in those roles that, really you want to pick someone who is trustworthy, mm-hmm. Who is, going to honor your wishes, who's going to act in your best interest. Now, a lot of times, they have limited choices of people who can serve. I have a lot of clients who are like, well, I'd love to have my brother, but my brother's the same age as me. So, what happens, he's not necessarily going to be able to help me down the road to do things. So you do have to be careful on the people you select. There are some safeguards that are in place in that Pennsylvania has under their laws to try to, make sure that those things don't happen. Yeah. But as we all know, and as we watch television and we see on television, there are people who aren't going to act always in your best interest. And I think sometimes it's just a little, it's a little too easy to be able to, to ATM, an extra $50 out. Maybe that'll go unnoticed.
Yeah.
But hopefully you're going to select someone who's able to handle everything for you and do things that are appropriate for what your needs are.
That sounds like really good advice. Tell us about something called healthcare powers of attorney. If you'll explain what that is and also what living wills are, so that we know the difference of the terms and why we need them.
Okay. Yeah. So the healthcare powers of attorney are a document that give, again, your agent the ability to make your healthcare decisions for you if you're unable to make your own healthcare decisions. So if you're, going for elective surgery, or, you've been in an accident and you're not able to communicate, the decisions that you want, that person steps in and is able to talk to your doctors, obtain information, and make appropriate decisions for your needs and care until you are back up and able to continue to do that for yourself. Now, in the case of an elderly individual, maybe who now has reached a point where they can't do that any longer at all, then that person has a more permanent role in making decisions for their, mother, father, aunt, uncle, whoever it is, spouse even, so that they are, being looked out for and after. And then the living will, advance directive, those are for making end-of-life choices.
Tell us about that, because pull the plug is in my head, and I'm just wondering when that comes up and who that decision falls upon.
Well, and so, when we do our documents, they're combined documents. So what happens is the healthcare power of attorney, there's a healthcare portion, that just talks about, things that you need, but there's not, necessarily at an end of life choice. And then we separately have provisions that talk about, well, if I have to make, if I'm in a terminal condition, or I've been in an accident, the doctor's saying there's no significant likelihood of recovery, then, there's a choice that needs to be made about what you wanted as far as continuing to be, maintained on the, respirator or other types of artificial medical equipment, or whether you want to, have those things removed, in which case, you may pass away of naturally versus through using the extraordinary measures. And so the living will or advance directive is really important because it gives guidance to the person that you've appointed, your agent, so that they know what your wants and needs are. I have a lot of clients who are very particular about, listen, I really don't want to be kept alive on machines, but I want to make 100% sure everybody has looked at every possible opportunity before.
I like that too.
Yeah. And so we'll add, specific language that says, hey, let's go out 2 weeks, or, let's go out a month, or let's get a second or third opinion.
That is such a good idea.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think that document is important. Now, in Pennsylvania really likes to make sure that if you don't have these things set up, that there's a possibility that they are able to make decisions for you, even if you don't have the document in place.
Pennsylvania does?
Yes.
Okay.
So they have healthcare, it's called a healthcare representative. And so that is a person, generally it's a hierarchy of family members, like spouse, then children, then a friend that, sorry, I know it's itchy all of a sudden.
It's okay. It's pollen season.
It is.
Right here in this room.
And so that document is, appoint somebody, or if you don't have a document, it appoints somebody to make those decisions for you. Where we run into issues similar to what we talked about earlier is if you're not in a traditional relationship where they're going to be a person who's listed in that statute. So if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend who you'd be wanting to make those decisions, they're not going to be able to make those decisions.
Or even a life partner for those of us who don't have boyfriends and girlfriends.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, but there is something in place, so if that became an issue, at least there is, a way that somebody can talk on your behalf. And
what a shock, though, if you're that nephew and all of a sudden the state's saying you're up because because there was no directive in place, living will telling us what to do.
Right. And I think it's really important. Part of the things that I recommend to clients, even though, definitely wills and powers of attorney are the legal documents that I can put together, but it's those instructional documents that I think are just as important. I'll give you another example. My father passed away almost 10 years ago now, very unexpectedly. And, we were in the hospital and they're telling us that, he's not going to survive. Did he want to do organ donation? I had no idea. It's not like we sit down at Thanksgiving and say, hey, what do you think about this?
You can take this one, but not this one. Yeah.
And it's just never a conversation we had. And same with my mom said the same thing. We never talked about it.
And it wasn't on the driver's license.
Well, it's interesting, because the driver's license is more for emergent situations. Okay. And if it is on your driver's license, then the doctors have the ability and authority to make a decision without consulting your agent. This is, this was not, he had had a stroke. He was in a coma. And so it was more, in this case, of deciding whether to remove the life-sustaining measures. And in so making that decision, we also had to decide whether we wanted to do any type of organ donation.
Right.
But again, it was something that, he had never told us. We had never written down. And so here you are in this very, emotional standpoint, trying to make a decision on, is that what he want or not want? And so I think it is important to have those conversations with your family, or to set out what your wishes are. So if God forbid, your family is in that situation, they have some direction, and they know that they're following what you want.
Well, you did tell us that we're all going to die. So one of the things that we all could have in that conversation are discussions about funeral arrangements, cremation, burial, what is the person's wishes. I know that those are very touchy subjects to have.
Yes.
And do you as an estate's attorney get involved sometimes with the family, sitting down to talk about those things, kind of giving them a list of, there's a lot to go over here?
We do to an extent. I try to give direction on, this would be a good thing to have put in place or to have written, but generally I don't get involved in here's where you're going to have your funeral, or we set up burial plots or anything like that, which is more of guidance. There are a couple really good resources that are available online, or written resources that families can use to be able to write those things down. One of the, and I'm not promoting anything, we don't sell them, but one of the things we've seen our clients use a lot, it's called a family love letter.
Okay.
There is a website, that you can go to, and I think you can order the book online, or you can do it through the electronic. And I think there's a couple of other similar types of services, but it's a very comprehensive way to list all of those things. If you have a burial plot, where that is, where's the information with regard to that. If you've set up funeral arrangements, it has that. Even has a place to put, what readings you might want at your funeral, what songs you might want. Really, actually, one of the things that I found really interesting too is, and we, again, found this out ourselves when my father passed away, was he was a Navy veteran. And they had asked us, the funeral home had asked us, for it's a form called DD-214, which is essentially says whether he left the military on an honorable basis or not, so that they know whether to have an honor guard at his funeral. And we didn't know where that was. So it's those types of things that you don't even know even exist, that I think are important to kind of, assemble, keep together, or at least put a, notation where they're located, so your family is able to find them more easily.
Right, and I think the government will provide you with a flag for military.
Yes, they did.
Right. It
was very, moving that they had all those things available.
Right, it definitely changes the feeling to know that the government appreciates your service and wants you to have a flag at the time of your death.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us some horror stories. If we don't have these things in place, people we don't like maybe making decisions about us, maybe getting money we didn't want them to have. What are some other problems that you've seen that coming to you and having all these documents in place with your wishes will prevent?
Yes. Now we have we can't be here for more than a half an hour.
I know. Just some of the horror stories.
I'll try to limit. I think the biggest example, one of the things, while we talked about a little bit earlier, if you don't have a will, Pennsylvania essentially writes the will for you. There's this statute that gives you the opportunity to identify, family members who will receive it. And even though, if let's just say you're still first marriage, you pass away, you have two kids who are your, you had with your husband or wife, and you pass away without a will. Well, a lot of people don't realize that those things don't automatically go to your spouse. So even though Pennsylvania has this, this law that says if you have a spouse and children, it gets there, it doesn't 100% all go to spouse. So in instances, we've had instances, I had this very successful physician years ago who didn't have a will in place. And it was shocking for his wife to find out that she was getting $30,000 plus 50%, and her children who were 20 and 22 are getting the other 50% of his estate. And I mean, so everyone thinks, oh, it's a traditional family,
Right.
and so everything goes to
Right.
spouse, and that's just not the way it works.
Well, tell us about taxes real briefly. In Pennsylvania, what happens when you die? How much of your estate's taxed?
Well, and I think that's another great example of that, because normally if everything is going to spouse, there's no tax when you first
No taxes.
right on the on the first spouse's death.
Right.
And then anybody who inherits from you after that, it's based on your relationship. So for a child over the age of 21, it's 4.5% inheritance tax. For a sibling of yours, it's 12%. For anybody else, it's 15% inheritance tax. So in this situation, we had spouse who was getting 50%. No, there was no tax on 50% of the estate, but all of a sudden, we had kids over the age of 21, so now we had to pay inheritance tax on those assets going to the to the children.
And can planning help avoid those taxes?
Unfortunately, not really.
Okay. Okay. I don't want people to think you're a miracle worker.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is you have to essentially give it away at least a year over your death to be able to have it out of your estate and not subject to inheritance tax.
Well, that's great to know. That's just one of many reasons that I think people need to contact you.
Yeah.
And to give you Lisa's contact information, we're going to show it on the screen. Again, she's a partner at Hamburg, Rubin, Mullen, Maxwell, and Lupin, and she's head of the estate planning department, and a welcoming face and a real active listener and helper who can help you and your family make sure that everything is in place just the way you want it to be. So we have our email, we have the firm website up on the screen, and if you have any trouble reaching Lisa, you can always reach out to me as well. I have been so delighted to learn everything you've told us today, and I hope everyone will join us for the next episode of Legal Talk with Stacy Clark.